Alrighty, today for 4.3 we are factoring trinomials. This is part 2. We are going to be factoring when the leading coefficient or the number in front of x squared is not equal to 1. So let's just recall some of the other factoring that we've already done. So here when we start with x squared minus 4x plus 3, the first thing we're going to do is check for a GCF. And we can see that these three terms do not have anything in common, so we can just t-chart x squared minus 4x plus 3. Up and down left, up and down right, crisscross, add to the middle. So everything until we get to that crisscross is multiplying. So this is positive 3 right here, but this is negative 4 right here. So what that means is that both these numbers need to be negative so that when we do up and down right, we get positive 3, but when we crisscross, add to the middle, we get 4x right there. So the t-chart is a tool to help us get there, and what we have now is that the factored form is x minus 3 times x minus 1, and the term form is up here. Okay, moving on to the next one. We only have 2 terms in this one, so we wouldn't do a t-chart because there's only 2 terms, but what we are going to do is we are going to see what they have in common. So what is the biggest number that goes into 3x squared and 15x. So start with 3. So friendly reminder, this is where we did this the other day. If you needed to, you could do it that way, but also you can just say, oh, both numbers are divisible by 3, and then they both have an x in common. And because there's 2 terms, we know there's going to be 2 terms inside of this parenthesis. And so because they had 3x in common, we're wondering 3x times what would give me that. So 3 times 3 is 1, but we need another x. And then for this one right here, the second term, we know it's going to be a minus. So we're saying 3 times what will give me this 15, and that would be 5. And x times what will give me x, and that's just 1. So that's where we get that the final answer is 3x times x minus 5, because if I were to reverse the process, these two statements would be equivalent. We're going to go ahead and skip this one right here because it's just another t-chart without anything special to it. And then we're going to get to this last one. And again, the thing that we're asking is what's the GCF? We should always start with that. Go check first. We know it stands for greatest common factor, but go check first. So what do these 3 terms have in common? And if you were thinking, oh, I got a t-chart that, you're right, because there's 3 terms, but we always GCF check first. So they all have a y. So I pull the y out, and then I have x squared plus 10x plus 24. And then remember, we carry that factor down because they wouldn't be equivalent if we didn't. X squared, 10x, and 24, x and x. And we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give us 24, but when we crisscross, they add up to 10x. So that's going to be 6 and 4. So this means that it's x plus 6 and x plus 4. Woohoo! Okay, so most of that was review right there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the actual lesson, which is asks us to factor. And like I told you guys, I want you to get in the habit of doing that GCF check. Do these 3 terms have a GCF? And they are all check numbers and variables, and this one does not. So you can cross it out. So then we're going to set it up into the t-chart. And what's different right now is that this number right here is a 2. And yesterday's lesson, that number was always a 1. So to make 2x squared, remember, it's up and down left, up and down right, crisscross, and then these numbers have to add to the middle. So this would be 2x and x. And then we have, this is positive 2 and this is positive 5. So what we would need to do is, like, let's say if we did 2 and 1, this would be 2x and that would be 2x, but that doesn't add to 5x. So instead, maybe what we need to do is put the 2 down here, so that gives us 4x, and the other 2 up here. Oh wait, that doesn't make sense. Can't be a 2, it has to be a 1 because it's multiply up. This would be 1x, and that does work. So for this one, term form is here, but if I wanted factored form, answer is left to right. So we have that. Okay. Next one that we have, let's check and see if we have a GCF first. So do any of these numbers have a coefficient, aka number, in common, or variable? No. So now that we've bypassed that step, we see that it has 3 terms. So we're going to do t-chart. And at this point we have our choice. Obviously 2x squared, this guy can be 2x and 2x, or it can be 4x and 1. You're just going to guess and check. I'm going to start with 4x and 1x. And up and down left, and now I need to do up and down right, but crisscross, add to the middle comes into play. So there's 7 and 5 are our most common multiples of 35 that we think of, but look down here, use a little bit of like detectiveness and see that this is positive 13. So what we want to do is have more positives than negatives. So if I did this as like -5 and 7, for example, crisscross would be 21x and -5x, which is positive, but it most definitely doesn't add to 13x, so that's not going to work. So what if I did, on the other hand, like -7 on the top and 5 on the bottom? So crisscross would end up giving me 13x. So this is the pattern that works, and remember that's a positive 5. So we would say the factored form of 4x squared plus 13x minus 35 is 4x minus 7 times x plus 5. You can choose to keep the 1 or not. Okay, moving right along to the next one where we have another trinomial, but we have to get in the habit of go check first for the GCF. And in this case, let's check the numbers. 2, 16, 32. Those are all divisible by 2. And then let's check the variables. X squared x. Oh, this one doesn't have one, so it's just the 2. So when I pull that 2 out and do reverse distributive property, which is kind of like dividing, since distributive property is multiplying, I get this right here. And so since I have the 2, I'm going to make sure that I put it in my answer so that this statement up here is equivalent with our factored form, but I only need a t-chart that piece. So x squared, 8x, and 16. You could put pluses in front of those two. It's a good reminder. So x and x, and then 16 and adds to 8 would be positive 4 and positive 4. If this number is positive and this number is positive, then we know both of those numbers have to be positive. So we get x plus 4 and x plus 4. Okay, so that's that. For the remainder of the front page here, I just want you to keep in the back of your mind always, can I do a GCF? Do that first. So if it doesn't have one, then go ahead and just cross it out, okay? So 3, 10, 8, no GCF, x squared x, nothing, no GCF. So then I would go straight to a t-chart because it has 3 terms. If you look at the actual notes, it will have what the t-chart is if you need that extra help. But I think we get the pattern. Left, up and down right, up and down left, criss, cross. And then those two have to add to the middle, okay? This one right here, 6, 37, and 56. There is no GCF on that, so we would go straight to the T-chart. And this one, we have 9, 30, and 24, which are all divisible by 3, but we don't have any variables in common. This portion would go in there, but we're also going to skip that because I think you guys are great and can get through that. Okay, let's take a look at the next page of notes, which is exactly the same thing. Guys, this is not super challenging, but it's super important because it's super valuable. So we take things slow during this chapter to make sure that everyone can get this. So let's start with the first one here. And we have 3 terms, but go check first that GCF. And there isn't a GCF here. So I'm going to do 3x squared, positive 4x down at the bottom, and negative 4. Clearly this is 3x and x because up and down left. But when I do up and down right, I have to be careful because no longer do I just have this x and x right here, right? There's a 3 in front, and when I crisscross, that comes into play. So what I want to pay attention to is that this is negative and this is positive. So that means that one of the numbers that goes in here has to be negative. But I want to end up with more positives so that this guy can stay positive 4. So my only choices for 4 are 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. And either the 1 is negative or the 4 is negative or 2 and 2. So I'm just going to do 2 and negative 2, and when I do crisscross add to the middle 3 times that, I get negative 6 and positive 2, which is close, but that's going to end up more negative than positive, so that doesn't work. So I'm going to go back and maybe just switch my numbers up, make this one positive and this one negative. So I get 6x and negative 2x, crisscross add to the middle. That works. So that means my factored form is 3x minus 2 times x plus 2. I haven't been putting every single time the plus sign in front of that because it's like positive 2, but you should know that it is there. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Ms. Wilkins said, go check first the GCF. Is there a number and or a variable? And since these are all even numbers right here, they're all divisible by 2. So if I pull out that 2, I have 3x squared plus 16x minus 35. Okay? And since the 2 is already been pulled out, I know when I write it in multiplication form or factored form, it goes down there. And then the trinomial or the parentheses with the 3 terms goes here. So I have 3x and x. And then again, negative, positive. So I want to end up with more positive, so I need the bigger number. So I'm going to put 7 down here because then that will give me positive 21x. I still need this guy to be negative, so one of the numbers has to be negative, and that just happens to work out. So that's 3x minus 5 and x plus 7, keeping in mind that the order of these and even this doesn't matter, okay, as long as you're multiplying. All right, so we are going to skip this one right here, right? Obviously, we would do GCF first, and we are going to skip the rest of these because they're all just T-charting. If you want to see how they're done because you've started it or you just want to make sure you're on the right track, they are all on the PDF of the notes in Canvas, okay? One more thing we want to check out is this right here, this apply number 1. So we are not going to do apply number 2. We can, and I'll just talk about it briefly because I want to make sure that you see it. But in apply number 2, they have this. They find that they have a 3 in common, but in their final answer, they didn't remember to carry that 3 down. So that's what went wrong. But we don't need to do that. We can just do that verbally. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the apply. And it says, given these two trinomial expressions, and it doesn't say trinomial, but they have 3 terms, so I know that they're trinomials. Which of the following factors do they have in common? Okay, so all we need to do is t-chart them. So I'm going to start with this one. They have n's instead of x's, but we're flexible, so we know this has to be 2n and n. And we know we need one more negative than positive, but we also know that that's negative, and it's up and down left multiply, up and down right multiply, criss multiply, cross multiply, add to the middle. So this particular one, when you figure out all the factors of negative 36, ends up being 9 and negative 4, because that makes negative 8n when you criss, and this makes 9n when you cross, and those do add to 1n. There's that invisible math. So this is 2n plus 9 times n minus 4. Now when we go to the second trinomial, it's actually a little easier because the number in front of n is just that invisible math 1. And then we have negative 10n and 24, n and n. So because this number is positive and this number is negative, I don't even know what the numbers are yet, but I know they both need to be negative. So I'm going to try negative 6 and negative 4 because that multiplies to give me 24. But when I crisscross and add to the middle, I also get negative 10n. So the factored form of that is n minus 6 times the quantity n minus 4. And the question is, what do they have in common? Well, they definitely both have an n minus 4, but not an n minus 2, not an n minus 12, and not, sorry, an n minus 2, even though this one I said minus 2, but it's a plus 2. Alrighty, that's it. Have a good day.